I lived with dead people. I mean, I really lived with them. Shared a roof with them, talked to them, took things from them. For nearly 4 months, my home was a crypt in the Evergreen Cemetery, and the only company I had were corpses in silk-lined boxes. My name is Sophie, but that wasn't always my name. He gave me that name. He put me in a soundproof box and tried to make me his life-size doll, but before him, there was the cold, and the dead, and the dead. They were kinder. It started in November, one of those nights where the cold isn't just air, it's a thing that gets inside your bones and sits there. I'd been sleeping in doorways, under bridges, the usual spots, but that year the winter came early and mean. I had a sleeping bag, but it was cheap, and the damp had gotten into it. My fingers were so numb I couldn't feel the coins people sometimes dropped. I knew I wouldn't make it to morning if I stayed out. I'd heard stories about shelters turning people away, or worse things happening inside them. I was more scared of the living than anything else. The living had put me on the street in the first place. I was walking, just trying to keep moving, and I ended up on the old side of town where the big Victorian houses give way to the even bigger cemeteries. Evergreen. It's this ancient gated place with tombs that look like small stone houses. The kind with iron gates and family names carved above the door. I stumbled up against the main fence, my teeth chattering so hard I thought they'd break, and I looked in. It was quiet, still, and I had this stupid, clear thought. Those stone houses look warmer than out here. The main gate was chained, but the fence was old ironwork. In one spot, near a big oak tree, the bottom had rusted and pulled away from the ground just enough. I don't know how I had the strength, but I clawed at the frozen dirt, made the hole bigger, and wriggled through. It tore my coat, but I didn't care. Inside, the wind was quieter. The tombs stood in rows, dark and silent. I walked between them, my footsteps the only sound. I was looking for one that wasn't just a headstone. I needed walls. I found it near the back, the Aldridge Mausoleum. It was made of gray granite with a heavy wooden door that had a metal grate over it. The lock was massive, ancient. I pushed on the door, not expecting anything, but it gave a little. Just a creak. The wood was old and warped. I put my shoulder against it, pushed again, and felt it move more. The third time, with a scraping sound that was way too loud in the silence, the door swung inward. The lock had rusted through its housing on the inside. The smell hit me first. It wasn't decay, not really. It was cold stone, dust, old wood, and something else. Dry, like forgotten flowers. I stepped inside. Moonlight came through the grated window in the door, enough to see shapes. There were 3 stone biers, like shelves, set into the wall. 2 had coffins on them. Plain, dark wood, just sitting there. The third was empty. The floor was dusty marble. It was freezing, but it was a dry cold. No wind. I closed the door behind me, and the silence became absolute. I could hear my own heart. I sank to the floor, wrapped myself in my damp sleeping bag, and for the first time in weeks, I felt safe. Nobody would look for me here. The dead don't judge. I slept like the dead myself. When I woke up, weak daylight was filtering in. I could see the place properly. It was small, maybe 8 feet by 10. Aside from the coffins, there was nothing. No chairs, no belongings. Just those 2 long boxes. I got up, my body screaming in pain, and went to look at them. I'm not sure why. Maybe to make peace with my new roommates. The first coffin had a simple brass plate. Eleanor Aldridge, beloved wife and mother, 1891 to 1942. The wood was smooth. The second, Arthur Aldridge, devoted husband, 1885 to 1950. I talked to them. My voice sounded strange in that small, hard space. Eleanor. Arthur. My name is... Well, it doesn't matter. I'm just passing through. I'll be quiet. I won't disturb you. It felt less crazy to acknowledge them. They were my landlords in a way. The first few days were about survival. I'd sneak out at dusk to find water from an old spigot near the cemetery's maintenance shed. I'd scavenge food from dumpsters behind the nicer neighborhoods, always careful to come back before full dark. The crypt became my base. I found an old, moth-eaten wool blanket tucked in a corner of the empty bier. It smelled of mildew, but it was another layer. I started to clean the place a little, brushing dust away with my hands. It gave me something to do. Then came the hunger for something more than just food. The cold was manageable now, but the boredom, the sheer emptiness of just sitting in a stone box was driving me mad. I started looking at the coffins differently. Not as roommates, but as storage. These were rich people, Victorians. They buried people with their jewelry back then, didn't they? The thought made my stomach clench. It was wrong, but so was starving. So was freezing. The world had already taken everything from me. What was one more wrong thing? One afternoon, the gray light coming in flat and cold, I went to Eleanor's coffin. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." The lid was heavy, solid. I pushed. It didn't budge. It was nailed shut. I looked around the crypt for a tool, anything. In a shadowy corner behind the door, I found a rusted iron bar, maybe a piece of an old fence post. It was heavy in my hand. I wedged it between the coffin lid and the side near the head. I put all my weight on it. The wood, a century old, groaned. There was a sickening crack as the nails tore free. I worked my way down the side, prying it open. The smell that came out wasn't bad, just intensely old. Like opening a closet sealed for 100 years. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. I kept my eyes on the lining, which was a faded white silk now yellow and brittle. I saw the glint first. On her left hand. A ring. A gold band with a small, dark red stone. Garnet, maybe. My fingers trembled as I reached in. The silk crumbled at my touch. Her hand was not bones, not entirely. It was desiccated, leathery. I closed my eyes, slid the ring off. It came easily. It was warm, which was the strangest part. Not from her, but from being enclosed. I pocketed it. Then I saw a glint at her neck, a locket, gold, on a thin chain. I took that too. I closed the lid as best I could, but it sat crooked now, a dark line showing where I'd violated it. I felt sick. I sat on the floor for a long time, the stolen jewelry burning in my pocket. But later that day I snuck out, walked to a pawn shop on the other side of the city. The man behind the counter didn't look at me twice. A dirty woman with a ring and locket? He probably thought I stole it from a living person, which was almost worse. He gave me $80 for both. No questions. With that money, I bought a real meal, a thermos, instant coffee, thick socks, and a battery-powered lantern. The guilt was still there, a heavy stone in my gut, but it was quieter than the gnawing hunger. Eleanor Aldridge had fed me, clothed me. I promised myself I'd only take from the ones who looked like they could spare it. That's how it went. I became a nocturnal creature of the cemetery. I'd explore other crypts, the older, more neglected ones. I got good at spotting which ones might have loose fittings, which families had probably died out with no one left to visit. I developed a system. I never took everything. A pair of earrings, a wedding band, a pocket watch. I left the rest. It felt less like robbery and more like collecting a weird, morbid rent. I talked to them while I did it. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. This will help a lot." "Just borrowing this, Mrs. Hawthorne. You don't need it down here." It made it feel less monstrous. And the peace I found there, it was real. During the day, I'd read books I'd salvaged from recycling bins. At night, I'd listen to the absolute silence broken only by the distant sound of traffic or an owl. There were no demands. No one yelled at me to move along. No one looked at me with pity or disgust. The dead accepted my presence. I started to prefer their company. The living world was a chaotic, painful place that had rejected me. Here in the city of the dead, I had order. I had rules. I had safety. I began to think I could stay forever. Maybe I'd grow old here, become the cemetery's secret ghost. When I died, they could just lay me on the empty third bier in the Aldridge crypt. It felt like a plan, a future. That's when he found me. It was late March. The thaw had begun, and a cold drizzle was falling. I was returning from a collection run, a man's signet ring from a crypt near the east wall, just after midnight. My lantern was off. I knew the paths by heart. I was maybe 50 feet from the Aldridge mausoleum when I saw a light inside. A steady, electric light, not my flickering lantern. My blood went cold. I froze behind a tall headstone. Someone was in my home. I thought it was the police or cemetery security. I was ready to run, to abandon everything. But then the door opened and a man stepped out. He wasn't a cop. He was tall, wearing a long, dark coat, perfectly dry despite the rain. He held a large, powerful flashlight. He swept the beam around methodically, like he was looking for something. Then he did something strange. He didn't leave. He went back inside and closed the door. Who waits in a crypt in the middle of the night? I stayed hidden for what felt like an hour, soaked and shivering. The light remained. He wasn't leaving. I had nowhere else to go. All my things, my blanket, my thermos, my small hoard of food, were in there. I had to either confront him or run and lose the only stability I'd known in years. Desperation makes you brave or stupid. I walked to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pushed it open. He was sitting on the empty third bier, right where I usually slept. My lantern was on the floor beside him, lit. He'd gone through my things. My few possessions were laid out neatly in front of him. The thermos, the blanket, a plastic bag with some crackers, the pawn shop money I had left. He looked up as I entered. He had a calm, handsome face, sharp features, neat dark hair. He looked like a lawyer or a businessman. He didn't look scared or shocked. He looked interested. "Hello," he said. His voice was soft, measured. "I was wondering when you'd come back." I just stood there, dripping, unable to speak. "This is quite a place you've made for yourself," he continued, looking around. "Quiet, private. I can see the appeal." He picked up my thermos. "Sophie, is it?" I blinked. "What?" "On the thermos. It's written on a piece of tape. Sophie." It was a thermos I'd found. The name was someone else's. I never bothered to scrape it off. "That's not me," I mumbled. "It is now," he said, smiling a little. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a settling smile, like he'd decided something. "It suits you better than whatever name you had before. Sophie. It's soft, quiet." He put the thermos down. "My name is Julian. I own this cemetery." That sent a new kind of chill through me. I believed him. He had that air of casual ownership. "I've been reviewing the estate plots," he said conversationally, noticing some disturbances. Very old locks failing, recent marks on doors, and then, of course, the missing items. His eyes flicked to Arthur's coffin, the lid still slightly askew. The Historical Society does occasional inventories. They're quite detailed. A garnet ring missing from Eleanor Aldridge, a signet ring from the Whitaker vault, a pearl bracelet from the little girl in the Driscoll tomb. He listed them off like a shopping list. He knew everything. I was caught. Plain and simple. I was just... I had no defense. He held up a hand. I'm not here to call the police, Sophie. If I were, they'd already be here. He stood up. He was taller than I'd realized. I find your situation fascinating. Your resourcefulness, your taste for solitude, your understanding that the dead are better companions. He took a step toward me. I didn't move. The world out there hurt you, didn't it? It's loud. It's cruel. It demands things you can't give. He was speaking the secret truth of my heart. I just nodded, a tiny movement. I can offer you something better than this, he said, gesturing to the stone room. Real walls, real warmth, silence, safety. No one will ever hurt you again. No one will even know you're there. You can be Sophie. Just Sophie. Peaceful, quiet, perfect. It sounded like a dream, the exact dream I'd been dreaming in this crypt, but voiced by a stranger, it sounded like a trap. What's the catch? My voice was a rasp. No catch, Julian said. Just companionship, on my terms. I appreciate beautiful, quiet things. I keep them safe. I've been looking for someone who understands the value of true quiet. Someone I can preserve. The word preserve should have been a warning, but I was so tired, so cold. The promise of warmth, of a bed, of not having to steal from corpses anymore. It drowned out the alarm bells. He saw my hesitation. Come with me now, he said, his voice gentle but leaving no room for argument. Leave this place. I have a car just outside the gate. We'll go somewhere safe. I looked around at the crypt, my home, at Eleanor and Arthur. They offered no counsel. They were just dead. I nodded again. Good, he said. He picked up my blanket, folded it neatly, and handed it to me. Bring this if you like. Leave the rest. I followed him out of the crypt, through the cemetery, and out a side gate I never knew existed. A sleek black car was waiting, engine purring. He opened the door for me. I got in. The leather seats were warm. The interior smelled clean. He drove for about 45 minutes into a wealthy suburb with large houses set far back from the road. We pulled into the driveway of a modern minimalist home, all concrete and glass, but with high walls surrounding it. He led me inside. It was stunning and silent. Thick carpets, muted colors. This way, he said. We walked down a hallway to a room at the end. He opened the door. It was a beautiful bedroom. A large, comfortable-looking bed, a dresser, soft lighting, and on one wall, what looked like a large floor-to-ceiling closet door. This is your room. The bathroom is through there. Get cleaned up. There are clothes in the dresser for you. Sleep. We'll talk more tomorrow. He left, closing the door softly behind him. I heard a faint click. I was too overwhelmed to care. I took a shower, the first hot shower in over a year. I put on the soft, expensive-feeling pajamas from the dresser. They fit perfectly. I collapsed into the bed. It was like sinking into a cloud. I was asleep in seconds. The next few days were perfect. Julian was polite, attentive, but not overbearing. He'd make us simple, delicious meals. He'd ask me quiet questions about myself, but never pressed if I hesitated. He called me Sophie every time. He gave me books to read, beautiful art books about silent places, deserts, deep sea, outer space. He played soft, ambient music. He never raised his voice. He never touched me except for a brief, guiding hand on my back. I started to relax. Maybe this was salvation. Maybe my luck had finally turned. Then, about a week in, he said, I want to show you my favorite room, the quietest place in the house. He led me back to my bedroom, but instead of stopping, he walked to the large closet door. He opened it. It wasn't a closet. It was a small, perfect room, maybe 10 by 10. The walls, ceiling, and floor were covered in a soft, pale gray foam. Acoustic paneling. In the center was a beautiful, velvet-upholstered chaise lounge. A single soft light was embedded in the ceiling. The air was still and temperature-controlled. "This is my retreat," Julian said, his voice reverent. "When the world gets too loud, I come here. Absolute silence. It's purifying. I thought you might appreciate it." I did. The silence was even deeper than the crypts. It was a void. It felt like floating. I sat on the chaise. "It's amazing," I whispered, and my own voice was absorbed instantly, leaving no echo. "I'm glad you like it," he said. "You can come here any time you want. The door doesn't lock from the outside." He smiled and left me there. I started using the room daily. It was my new crypt, but luxurious. I'd spend hours in there, reading or just sitting in the perfect quiet. Julian would sometimes join me, just sitting quietly in a chair he brought in. It felt like companionship, understanding. The changes were gradual. First, it was about my clothes. He'd bought me a wardrobe, beautiful, simple dresses in soft fabrics. "Those old jeans are so rough," he'd say. "You deserve to feel comfortable." I agreed. Then it was about my hair. He'd hire a stylist to come to the house, who would cut and color it exactly as Julian specified, a soft honey blonde, always worn down and smooth. "It frames your face perfectly," he'd say. I didn't mind. I looked better than I ever had. Then he started giving me small tasks. "Sophie, could you sit here while I read?" "Sophie, let's have tea at exactly 4 p.m. "Sophie, try this posture. It's more graceful." He'd correct the way I held a cup, the way I walked across a room. He called it refinement. I was so grateful, so comfortable, that I wanted to please him. I started anticipating what he wanted, a certain stillness, a quiet smile, a specific way of listening. One day he presented me with a large flat box. Inside was a beautiful, vintage-style doll. Porcelain face, glass eyes, blonde hair, wearing a lace dress. "She reminds me of you," he said. "So serene, so perfect." He placed it on a shelf in the living room where he could always see it. That should have been the moment, but it wasn't. The moment came later, during one of our sessions in the quiet room. I was on the chaise. He was in his chair. He'd been quiet for a long time. Then he said softly, "You're almost perfect, Sophie. Almost. But there's still noise. In your eyes. Little flickers of the old you, the scared, hungry woman from the crypt. We need to quiet that, too." I felt a prickle of fear. "How?" "Practice," he said, "and help." The next evening, after a light dinner, he handed me a glass of water. "It will help you relax," he said. It tasted slightly bitter, but I drank it, trusting him. Soon I felt incredibly heavy and drowsy. He guided me to the quiet room. "We're going to practice true stillness," he said, his voice coming from far away. I lay on the chaise. The door closed, the light dimmed to almost nothing. And then, nothing. No sound, no light, just a thick, woolly blackness. I tried to move, but my limbs were like lead. I tried to speak, but my throat wouldn't work. I was paralyzed, awake, and trapped in absolute sensory deprivation. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. But I couldn't scream. I couldn't even twitch. I was buried alive in silence. I don't know how long it lasted. An hour? 3? Time died in that box. When the door finally opened and the light came up, I gasped, sucking in air like I'd been drowning. Julian stood in the doorway, smiling. "See? Now you understand real quiet. The mind finally stops its chatter. You were so beautiful in there, just like my doll." That was the beginning of the end. The sessions became regular. The dose and the water ensured I couldn't resist. He'd put me in the room, my soundproof box, and leave me there in chemically induced paralysis for what felt like eternities. He called it polishing. In between sessions, my life was a script. Wake up at 7, wear the blue dress, sit by the window from 10 to 12, lunch at 1, quiet time from 2 to 4. He was crafting me, sanding away every rough edge of my will, my memories, my fear. He didn't want a woman. He wanted a life-size doll he could pose and admire. And in the soundproof box, he could finally achieve the perfect stillness he craved. The horror wasn't in violence. It was in the erasure. He was methodically deleting the person I was and painting over the blank canvas with his own ideal. Sophie, the quiet girl, the perfect doll. My salvation came from the very thing he was trying to erase, the survivor from the crypt. In the void of the box, with nothing but my own terror for company, that hardened, desperate creature woke up. She couldn't move her body, but she could think. And she remembered the dead. She remembered Eleanor's leathery hand. She remembered the taste of stolen food. She remembered the feeling of the iron bar prying open a coffin lid. He'd made a mistake. He'd given me the key to my own prison during the very first tour. The door doesn't lock from the outside. He'd set it to make me feel safe, but he used the chemical lock now, the drugged water. One afternoon before a scheduled session, I pretended to drink. I let the water pool in my mouth, held it as he guided me to the quiet room. I lay down on the chaise, letting the water trickle out onto the velvet, hidden by my hair and the dim light. I feigned the heavy breathing, the limpness. He stood over me for a few minutes, admiring his work. Then he left, closing the door. The perfect silence descended, but my mind was clear, my body was my own. I waited, counting slowly in my head, giving him time to go to another part of the house. Then I sat up. In the pitch black, I felt my way to the door. I turned the handle. It opened smoothly. I stepped out into the bedroom. The house was silent. I didn't hesitate. I didn't take any of the beautiful clothes. I walked out of the bedroom, down the hall, through the pristine living room, past the porcelain doll on the shelf, and to the front door. It was unlocked. He was so sure of his chemical lock he'd gotten careless. I walked out into the afternoon sun. I kept walking in my soft, pale dress, barefoot. I walked until I found a bus stop, got on the first bus that came, and rode it to the end of the line. That was 6 months ago. I'm in a different city now. I have a different name. I sleep with the lights on and a fan running for noise. I can't stand silence anymore. It feels like the walls are closing in. Sometimes I think about going back to the cemetery, to the Aldridge crypt, to apologize to Eleanor and Arthur for leaving so abruptly, to see if the third beer is still empty. It's the only place that ever felt like a home I chose, not a prison I was lured into. But I won't go back. He might be looking. He taught me the final lesson the dead couldn't. That peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the absence of fear. And you can't find that in a crypt or in a soundproof box. You have to build it yourself, out in the noisy, messy, dangerous world. I'm trying to build it now. One loud, difficult day at a time. The dead were kind, but they were dead. I choose the noise. I choose the struggle. I choose to be something he could never understand. Alive.